Good morning. I don't know why the class says it starts at 11:30. It's actually 11:45. So anybody that's on Zoom, just hang out for a few more minutes and we'll get started.
You have a basis.
Perfect.
What has been discussed, so.
All the fun stuff. No worries. Yeah, no problem. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. It's Monday. We're just sitting here talking about some crazy real estate stuff, right? If you want to hear about crazy real estate stuff, I tell you, it's funny. If you don't know who Lee Brown is, you should get to know who she is. She's an amazing trainer that goes around the country, and she's a real estate agent in, I think, Charlotte, North Carolina. And she talks with a little bit of a twang, if you will, or kind of like y'all and stuff like that. She's hysterical, but she has a podcast that's called Crazy Shit in Real Estate. And it's funny, some of the stuff that you listen to on there. Now, there's a lot of other podcasts out there that you learn something from, but these are just fun because you think you're the only person that's dealing with this crazy stuff, and there's all kinds of fun stuff. So, all right, we are going to talk about listing stuff today. The class is interactive, so ask questions as we go. If you had a rough deal and there's something that you need to share about something that we can all learn from, great. The idea is to go over the exclusive right to sell, the listing documents that you're going to be going over with your sellers. And that way, if you guys have questions on it, this is when you can ask, but also it teaches you how to fill out the contract itself. Okay. All right, so I have brought up the exclusive right to sell. This is the large agreement, so it just seems to be easier to do on here. So you're going to see that it's actually 3 pages instead of 2 pages. You can do it as little as 2 pages, but I use the larger print. So I'm going to go over each paragraph a little bit, just kind of explain what it says and what the prompts are that you should be contacting or talking to your sellers with, okay? So the authorization here is pretty straightforward as far as putting in the property address. You know the address of the property that you're going to be listing for sale, and you should already have ascertained a listing price. And so you should know that, and that's where you would fill in this third box. And it just says that, here, if you have an executor, a guardian, a trustee, a power of attorney, the seller needs to provide us with a true and complete copy and evidence of that. So one thing to always remember is, there might be an executor, and they might be an executor of an estate or whatever, but there could be more than one executor. There doesn't just always have to be one executor. Make sure you're getting a copy of whatever it is they're saying gives them the power. If they don't have the power, or they can't prove that they have the power, you probably shouldn't be listing the property, because it is illegal for us to list a property for sale that we can't really sell. Okay. One of the biggest things is here to remember about a power of attorney that dies with the person, with the party. So if you have a husband and wife that are married, and the wife has a power of attorney, the husband has power of attorney, but she's passed away, unfortunately, that power of attorney is no longer any good because she is deceased. It died with her. So now, if he was to provide you with that, you'd have to say, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, unless the home is just in your name, or you're the executor of her estate, or whatever the documents are that say you have the legal right to sell the house, you don't. Now, they don't like to hear this, just so you know, but you are educated in this field. You're there to prepare them and tell them what the right thing is. So make sure that you get documents of anything that they say if it's not the person that is actually on the deed, okay? The term and the brokerage fee. So in consideration of the broker's efforts to market the property, the seller grants the broker an exclusive right to sell the property. So you're going to have a start date. The start date could be sometime next week. It could be in a month from now. It could be today. It just depends on whenever the listing is supposed to go active in the MLS. Okay. So you're going to put that start date, and then it's through midnight on whatever the end date is. Legally in Ohio, a listing agreement must have an end date. So you always have to have an end date in here. Otherwise, the listing is not valid. Okay. So seller shall pay the broker fee of 7%. Now, one of the great things about being a Keller Williams Legacy Group too is you have the ability to change the commission as you see fit. You do not need my permission as your broker to negotiate the commission. If you're going on a deal and it's a real tough, negotiation, and you have to take 6%, or you have to take 6% on the first 100,000 and 4% after that, you can do that. If you're going on a higher end listing, and maybe perhaps you're going to do it for a 5% because it's $400,000 or $500,000 house, you want to do that, great. If you end up taking a listing for 1% on the list side and you give away 3%, so you take it for 4%, you're giving away 3%. Shame on you for not showing your value, but you're allowed to do it. You do a lot of hard work for that money, so you should always try and get the 7%. It doesn't happen very often anymore, but I will tell you there are a lot of agents that will not go below 7% or even 6%, and even higher end. There's a couple higher end agents in our marketplace that they sell $3, $4, $5 million houses, and they will not go below 6%. And I don't blame them, because everybody, you're worth the money if you're giving good service. It's good customer service is hard to come by in this world today. So use that to your advantage. It is that we put in there a minimum of 3,500, but whichever is greater, and then plus the 225. So the 225 is the additional commission fee that must be charged on every single transaction. The only time you don't have to charge that is if you have sold to that client more than twice. So if they have bought something and sold something, or bought 2 houses with you, or sold 2 houses with you in the 1 calendar year, then you don't have to charge them that 225 for the rest of that calendar year. Okay. The 225, depending upon the commission split that you're on, is great. You get to keep $75 of that money, which is huge, depending upon how many deals you sell in a year. If you have 100 houses that you sell, $7,500 extra dollars in your pocket. So it's definitely worth to be on that 70-30 plan. But those of anybody that's on the 80-20 plan, you still need to charge that. Otherwise, it does come out of your commission. Okay. Now, I will tell you on VA transactions, typically a bank will not allow a veteran to pay the 225. If that's the case, that's fine. When you're doing the green sheet, just shoot Dee Dee an email, let her know it's a veteran. They're not allowed to be charged that fee, and we'll waive it. That way you're not responsible for it. Okay. All right, so this just then goes on to say basically that we are going to be the exclusive one to sell this property. So there are different rules in Ohio. You can have exclusive listings, you can have non-exclusive listings. Ours is the exclusive right to sell, which means we are the only brokerage that can sell and represent this client under something. So you can have open agreements where we do not practice this at Keller Williams, but I'm just telling you, there are options. Sometimes the seller might ask you, well, can you list my house? But if I bring the buyer, I don't pay you anything. And if you sell the house, then I pay you. Unfortunately, no, we don't work that way. It's an exclusive right to sell. You don't have the right to sell your own home. Now, you might negotiate something with them to say, hey, if you bring the buyer, I might reduce the commission overall. But you exclusively have the right to sell the house for the time period in which you have the property listed for. Okay. Now, it does go on to say that within 180 days of the expiration of this agreement, if a buyer, and believe it or not, this has happened. So let's say I have a listing for sale and a Howard Hanna agent brings the buyer through. We never get the deal together. The buyer's just not real keen on the house yet, but the expiration date's coming up in a week. It expires. And all of a sudden that buyer calls their agent and says, hey, I want to come back. I actually do want to buy that house. Well, just because the listing agreement is expired, we've got it built in here for another 180 days that if we had brought a buyer in that time frame of the actual listing, then for 180 days after the expiration, you're still going to owe us a commission and we will take care of the transaction for you. Now, I will tell you, it's a little difficult sometimes to enforce that because you don't even know. A buyer might walk up to that seller's door and exclude both agents and nobody ever knows anything, right? So it's really, if we're paying attention and we know what's going on with the property and the seller is kind of shady in that way and wants to do something like that, we can go back to them and say, hey, remember, for 180 days, we brought that buyer, so you owe us a commission. Okay. Cooperation, it just says that we are going to cooperate with other brokers. And what that means is that we are going to put this in the MLS system. It could be in the Mansfield MLS. It could be in Ashland. It could be in MLS Now. It could be in Knox County MLS for Tina over here. I think she's our only member out there. But we have 5 or 6 different MLSs that we are a part of at this brokerage. So typically the majority of everybody uses MLS Now. Okay. But this gives us the cooperation to say that we are going to cooperate with other brokers by putting in whatever commission is owed to them in the MLS. So if it's a 6% listing and you're keeping 3%, giving away 3%, 3% is going to be put in the MLS to show that we are cooperating with other brokers. Okay. Lockbox access. This is super important to go over with your client because I only use Supras in my business. I have a decent amount of Supras. I highly recommend them if you ever find an agent that's getting out of the business or wants to sell their Supras. A brand new Supra is probably about $110 with tax. It's not cheap. You all have access to Supra app as part of your MLS dues. If you're a brand new agent or an agent that doesn't think that they're even going to use the Supra, think again. You should absolutely contact the board and download that on your phone with an authorization because it updates automatically every night. And whether or not you choose to engage with a Supra lockbox yourself by putting on your listing, you are going to run into an agent that's going to put a Supra on a door, and the weekend the board is not open. So unfortunately, if Friday night at 6 o'clock, it's too late. You're not, when you're scheduling that showing for Saturday or Sunday for a Supra, that other agent's probably going to be quite angry at you if you haven't already downloaded the app. So I tell you, that's just a kind of public service announcement there. But lockbox access, you need the seller's permission. And this is how we get it. The written permission that says that the seller acknowledges that a buyer's agent, inspectors, appraisers, and other third parties may photograph or video record in the property during such access, and the seller hereby consents to the same. So it's giving consent that a home inspector taking photos inside their home, all of that is going to take place. And again, that the buyer's agent has access to that lockbox. Right before that, it does say to provide the lockbox code and other access to property to third parties. So they're giving us permission. I will tell you, as your broker, even though this gives the permission, a seller, you may or may not have gone over it with them to that extent. Maybe they did everything on dot loop and they didn't even read through it. So I'm going to tell you that before you ever give out a lockbox code to a home inspector, an appraiser, or anybody else of that such, if it's not you or the buyer's agent that you're giving that code to with the seller's permission, you should email your client or text message your client and say, the appraiser is coming next Monday at 12 o'clock. Do I have your permission to not be there and give them lockbox access? If the seller says yes, then you can go ahead and give them the code and let them go in without you. But a licensee should be there at all times. Now, in our marketplace, it's very common that we're not there for a pest inspection. A pest inspection happens within 15, 20 minutes. The pest inspector's in and out. A lot of times they'll call and say, hey, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'm going to go in, get out of there. You give them the lockbox code and they're done. But you need your seller's permission for that. This paragraph does go over that, and it does give us that permission, but I'm telling you, take it a step further, because a seller may not always understand that you're giving somebody permission without you to enter the property. Okay. So that's just kind of why we go over this, is these bold things kind of trigger things for you when you're going over stuff with a seller about what you should be doing. Okay. Authorization to market. This is telling the seller that you are giving us exclusive right to authorize us to sell this property and market the property for sale. It's going to go in the MLS, and it's going to go out there to every website known to man. So if you don't want a picture of your son's bedroom with their name above their crib or whatever, then you need to tell us, first of all, that we're not allowed to take a picture in your son's bedroom, or we're not going to take any interior photos. But know that whatever interior photos we take with your approval, they're going to be out there on the internet. So one of the things that you'll learn as you go through real estate is, judges, sometimes the sheriffs or police officers, a lot of them, they can write a letter to the Stark County auditor or any auditor and exclude their residents from being able to be searched. So you can type in their name, you can type in their address, it will come up and say there is no search, and that's for privacy and protection. So that, if somebody's mad at a judge or a sheriff that arrests them or whatever, they can't find out where they live and retaliate against them. So that's why I say about the authorization to market. You might have one of those clients in your future where you must take an exterior photo of the property, but they do not want their home videoed. They do not want the layout put out there for anybody, and they don't want pictures because they don't want anybody knowing what they have in their home. So make sure you kind of go over that stuff with them and get their permission. Again, this gives us the permission, but you want to make sure that you've talked to your sellers about that. Okay. Electronic surveillance, boy, I don't know any property anymore that doesn't have electronic surveillance. And I mean, it comes down to even a Ring doorbell or a baby monitor camera. And they're pretty much motion activated. So the moment that you start walking by or talking, it's recording you. If somebody has a electronic doorbell, a smart doorbell or whatever, you're going to say, yes, the seller does have that. And you also, this is going to remind you to say, is that staying? Because it's attached to the house. In the purchase agreement, it's going to tell you that the doorbell stays, including smart doorbells and thermostats. So this is a great time to have a conversation with your seller to say, if you have cameras, Ring cameras on your garage, inside your house, are they bolted to the property? Because if they are, they're staying with the property unless you exclude them. Now, you can't just exclude them in the listing agreement. You'd have to exclude them in the listing agreement, exclude them then in the MLS, and most importantly on the purchase agreement, because whatever's in the listing agreement doesn't necessarily convey to the purchase agreement. And the same thing with the MLS. You might negotiate that the cameras are staying even though they weren't supposed to stay. Okay, so you just have to make sure you have that discussion with them. But when they do have electronic surveillance in the house, you should put in the broker remarks in the MLS, put the buyer's agent and the buyer on notice. Security cameras recording at property, or whatever verbiage you want to put in there, but make sure you put something in there that says that the class, or that, you know, they're being videoed. Okay. The Ohio state law states that you can video somebody without their permission. That's not a problem. I could record a conversation with Tina and I if I wanted to, and I don't have to get her permission, and I can do that when it's just the two of us, or if we're in a group or whatever. The problem is you cannot record somebody that you are not a party to the conversation. So for example, I could not put my phone on record right now, set it down, get up, walk out of the room and listen to your conversation. That's illegal. That's the same thing with the video surveillance. Is you have a third party that is not a part of the conversation watching their own home, listening to the things that are being said, and it's probably being recorded. So that's the problem. And we don't know if they're recording it or not. They could just be watching it. Maybe they're recording it. We don't know. So that's why you want to have that discussion. Okay. Fair housing. This paragraph is the same in every single listing agreement, whether you're at Keller Williams or at a different brokerage. This is language from the federal housing community that just tells us fair housing. This has to be in there. So basically, if you're with the seller, that what I always like to say, and it's never gotten me in any trouble, and people are always okay with it, is I just say our commitment to fair housing, as long as the person that's coming here, their money is green, we don't care anything else about them. And, you know, you can choose your own words on how you want to say things like that. But as long as the money is green, it's in US dollars and you can cash the check, that's all that matters. So most people do not have a problem with that. Now, I will tell you that in my career, I have had a few people say something to me and say, well, I would never let this person buy my house. And as hard as it is to get up and walk out of that house and not take the listing, and even on a higher end listing, you are going to do yourself and the community in general a lot better to get up and walk out of that house and excuse yourself and say, I'm sorry, but based on the communication that we just had, I don't fairly think that I can represent you. I wish you a good day, and you'll have to find another agent. It is very difficult, but I'm telling you, for the sake of your career, you'll want to do that. I feel like in our generation, when I say ours, like I'm going to be 40 here soon. And so it's like, I feel like in our generation or younger, that is getting less of a problem, but it still exists. So it's really sad. I felt so bad. I went to a listing appointment to an African-American lady, and she was the nicest person. I didn't think anything different about her as I do any other seller. And she said to me, should I take my pictures down? And I said, why would you take your pictures down? I don't recommend that anybody, unless you have a whole wall cluttered of stuff, you know, but I'm like, if you have family photos and they're tastefully done and they're on your wall, why would I make you take them down? She said, well, because I'm Black. And I said, what's that have to do with anything? And she said, well, I've just heard the stories where people will not buy somebody's home because they're African-American or they're Black instead of whatever culture they are. And I said, I'm really sorry that you've ever had to live in that world. I don't live in that world, thankfully, and I'm glad. I've never been discriminated against for that. And so I'm very sorry for that. And she said, well, I appreciate that, but it's happened in my lifetime and I'm just used to it. I thought that was the most sad thing I ever heard. Like, it's disgusting. So I don't know if other agents then told her to take her home down. We never did end up listing it because she wanted way too much for this house. But nonetheless, it was just a learning experience. Like, wow, this is a crazy world we live in. So, you know, have that discussion with those sellers. If they're going to discriminate for the protected classes, you just need to. So disclosure, this is always a fun one. You need to let the seller disclose anything that they want to and not disclose to you. You obviously won't know if they don't disclose it to you. But if they disclose something to you and they don't want to put it on the property disclosure form, again, that's probably another seller that's going to get you in trouble. You cannot help the seller fill out the residential property disclosure form. We'll go over that form here in a little bit. The best thing that you can do is give them that form after you leave or before you get there, or while you're up measuring the rooms in the house. Let them fill it out, because inevitably, if you're sitting there, they're going to ask you questions. Well, the basement doesn't always leak, but during a heavy rain, I can get a little bit of water. What do you think I should say? Well, whatever you think you should say, whatever you just said, maybe that's something you want to say. You just can't help them. But disclosure is one of those things where you want to make sure that you convey to the seller, you should disclose any and everything about the home that is a problem. Now, they may have had a brand new furnace put in 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago. And is there a reason to disclose that the old furnace broke and didn't work and now there's a new furnace? Probably not. They might want to do that. And if they do, that's fine. But if something is brand new, typically, why would you disclose anything about it? The old furnace is gone, doesn't mean anything, and it's a moot point. Same thing with a roof. Now, the roof, sometimes they might say, well, I never fixed that in the bedroom. There's a yellow stain up there in the bedroom 5 years ago. I had a new roof put on. I'm just too lazy. I never paint anything. Is that something that I should put in it? It's a disclosure issue. They're going to find it. So you should probably put in there anything that you can think of that you should disclose or you would want to be disclosed to you by somebody else. They won't always do it. And you unfortunately will find out things as you go through an inspection and stuff. There are even times that, you think a seller is super upfront and they're going to be honest with you. And unfortunately, the buyer buys the house or a home inspector comes in and sees a bunch of tree roots inside the sewer line. They call somebody out and the guy says, I'm here once a year, every year. And the seller just lied because they didn't put anything on the disclosure. It's going to happen. You can't control that, but you have a duty as an agent to disclose anything that is wrong with the property. So if they disclose it to you, you're disclosing it to the next party. Okay. This just says that in the event of any claims or causes or actions alleging seller's failure to accurately disclose something, that the seller is indemnifying us as the broker. Because again, if we're ignorant to the fact that they never shared anything with us and we honestly don't know about something, how can we possibly disclose it, right? So that's just a hold harmless for us. Okay. Confidentiality, anything that the seller wants to remain confidential between you and the brokerage needs to remain confidential. So things that you wouldn't think are a big deal, but they can be. There might be a seller going through a divorce and they do not want you to tell the buyer that they're going through a divorce, because in a certain market, if you heard the words divorce, you thought, oh, these people want to get away from each other. They will take anything for this house, and I'm going to offer them $10,000 to $15,000 less, and they're going to take it because they want away from each other. You've just given away clients money that wasn't yours to give away, and you've disclosed something that they may or may not want to be disclosed. Things like that. So just ask them, is there anything? You're always going to remain confidential. If they said to you, hey, you're going to list my house at 189, but I'd take 184. You're never going to say that to somebody else because that's a confidential thing. But things like a divorce, or we're moving out of state and we have to be at my next job by February 1st. So this house has to close. Those are things they may not say to you because they don't want you to put like motivated seller, or seller has a deadline to move, because then a buyer may think that they're going to be able to get a deal on a house. So ask the seller, what is it, if there are anything that should be confidential, and you need to keep that confidentiality between you and the client. Okay. Excluding fixtures. This is one of those where, if grandma's beloved chandelier is hanging in the hallway or hanging somewhere in the house on a wall or something like that, and it's affixed to the property, and they say, I'm excluding this, this is not going. I always recommend to them, yes, I know it looks beautiful, and yes, I understand you're taking it with you. Yes, I understand the photos would show much better with it in it. My recommendation is, before we take the photos, you're going to take that down and put up a different light, whatever it is, or fixture. If it's a mirror in a bathroom, even, whatever it is, take it down, replace it, or just take it down and it just doesn't exist, put a cap over it or something like that. If it's an electrical fixture, 9 times out of 10, if we take a picture of it and it is shown in a picture, a buyer is going to want it. Even if you put in the MLS, this is excluded, they might go, but it fits the space so well, I want that. Or we do everything electronically these days, and you are in the car with your spouse on the way to a birthday party. You totally forget that they wanted this excluded. You don't put it in the purchase agreement because the buyer's agent didn't either. You don't remember it. You get a fully executed contract. Everybody's happy until closing day or walkthrough, and now you're in the hot seat. So my recommendation, always up front, if there's a fixture that is excluded, get rid of it before you ever take photos of that property. If you can't do that, you need to exclude it here, exclude it in the MLS, and make sure it's on the purchase agreement as excluded. Okay. Home warranty, the seller elects to have a home warranty or does not. One of the nice things, I think America's Preferred may also have it, but I know 210 does have the seller's coverage for free. So you can put a home warranty on every single listing if you wanted to, and it costs the seller nothing. You can even cancel it if they choose not to use it, if it's not negotiated into the purchase, but it is available to them for 100% free. If you look at that, it'll tell you what the seller's coverage is for free. And so if there is a home inspection and something happens, they might have to pay $100 deductible and get their furnace fixed or their drain cleaned or whatever it is that's included in that. So it's not a bad idea to offer a free home warranty on every single listing that you do. And then you just have to make sure that you cancel it if they choose not to buy it, if the buyer doesn't buy it. Okay. And point of sale inspections, we don't have a lot of point of sale inspections here in our county. Summit County requires a well and septic to be done. Stark County requires the septic to be done, but not the well. Make sure you're very knowledgeable about the areas that you're selling, because like myself, I'm not going to go to Bedford Heights and sell a house. I don't care if I know the person, if I don't know the person, if they're my best friend, I'm not going there because I know nothing about the city of Bedford Heights. I don't know why I chose that. You're smiling. Did we talk about one of those?
No.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. And I think that's why, because I do remember seeing something about that on a point of sale recently. But anyway, different areas have point of sales inspections, and if you're not aware of it, then unfortunately you can get your client into a lot of trouble. They might close on a house that there should have been a point of sale, and maybe there's a big problem with the sewer line and the downspouts are dumping into the sewer line and they're not supposed to. And you just cost them $10,000 to get it fixed. Trust me, they're going to come back and get somebody to pay for that. So be knowledgeable about the areas that you sell and ask the seller if they, know of any point of sale inspections in their area. I would definitely tell you, you can ask them, and I recommend it just to be on the safe side. But if you asked me, if you came into my house and asked me if there were any point of sale inspections, I'm going to think you don't know my area very well. And I'm probably going to say I should probably find a different agent. But you can say to them, listen, I'm familiar with this area. These are the inspections that are point of sale. Are you aware of any changes? Are you aware of anything that, whatever, just have that discussion with them and let them know that, sometimes there are point of sale requirements. Seller's obligation, this is a great time to tell the seller, listen, you have to keep this property, or you should, if you want to make the most money on it, keep it in good condition. In the middle of the summer, don't stop mowing the yard because you're out of state. Have somebody check on it. If it's the middle of winter time or whatever, as your agent, I am happy to come by and take a look at this property and make sure that nobody's broken into the property, that there are no pipes broken. However, it is not my responsibility. If your furnace goes out, if your hot water tank breaks, if a pipe bursts and I don't get here for 3 days and the basement's flooded, it was not my responsibility as the agent. You own the home. You need to make sure that it's kept up. If you need somebody here every day, you should negotiate that as part of your fee and show up every day, or you should tell them they need to find somebody to show up every day. But it is not your responsibility. And that's basically what it just says. Any vacant property, I can do my best, but I'm not responsible for what happens to it. Okay. Cybersecurity, we just added this just to, say, listen, we're never going to ask for your bank accounts, credit cards, wiring instructions. We're never going to give them to you, and you need to maintain that. There should be no reason that you ever ask your client for any of that information, and certainly don't put things in email that should be secure, because email is not secure. Okay. Just goes on to say it's a binding agreement between the listing agent and the broker. It can be mutually agreed upon that we can sever ties and we can release the listing should that need to happen. And it goes both ways. If a seller calls and says, hey, I'm not happy and I do not want to be a part of Keller Williams Legacy Group Realty, representing me anymore, I don't like my agent, I'm just taking my house off the market, that's fine. As the agent, you have a choice. You can either withdraw the listing with release, which releases them to go list their house with any other broker in the country, or you can withdraw them and not release them. I will say, sometimes there are unrealistic sellers and clients in this world, and sometimes you worked your rear end off and they are still just not happy and they want out of it. You might just withdraw them, but not release them. There are times where we have a client that we just can't wait to get rid of because they've caused nothing but heartaches and headaches. The heartaches to the buyers that entered into a contract. Now the seller won't sell the house to them or won't do anything, or they're just difficult. And we say, hey, we're letting you go. We're firing you as a client, and you can absolutely do that too. The only time you need my signature is on a withdrawal with release. If you do a status change on a property, a price drop, if you do commission change, I don't need to sign any of that stuff. That's your business. You guys are running your own business here, you do what you need to do. The only time is because a listing belongs to the brokerage, not to the agent. So unfortunately, you can negotiate with the seller. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you tell me, Rich, this person is a pain in the rump, I just want to release them, I don't care. I will absolutely sign that withdrawal with release or without release. Whatever you as the agent recommend, that's what I'm going to do. And if I need to, I'll talk to the client, worst case scenario. Okay. But it is a binding agreement. Okay? So you'll get their signatures on here. You're going to always sign it if you're on a team. So for example, if Tina and I are on a team, Tina's going to sign it and I'm going to sign it. The reason for that is because I'm going to be privy to confidential information of the sellers, and they need to understand that there are two parties representing them. Now, when you have much larger teams, then unfortunately you might have 3 signatures on here. You might have 4. Depending upon how you run your team, you might have 10. I don't recommend that, but depending upon what your broker says and where you're at, that could be. So does anybody have any questions? I know we went over that relatively quick, but a lot of good tidbits in there. Any questions? Anybody online have questions?
I have a question about what's the difference between with release and without release? Does that mean that it's still the broker's listing, not the agent?
Okay, so you ask a very valid question. So I will tell you, one of the things to learn is those of you that have started at Keller Williams, or those of you that have never been at a brokerage that keeps the listing when the agent leaves. We do not typically, you would have to do something so egregious for me to keep your listing if you were, to leave the brokerage, or if you left the business or done whatever. Understand the listing agreement is between the broker and the client. The agent, and not that you're relevant in any way, shape, or form, but the law states that the broker owns the listing. So if for some reason Tina walks in today and she's having a heck of a time with a client, whether she wants to be a part of their life or not, as the broker, I have the right to say, listen, we need to keep this client happy. They're not happy with you. I'm sorry that this happened to you. We'll work out something internally as far as money, but I'm taking this listing from you and I'm giving it to him. I can do that. Does that happen? Not very often ever. But the release part of it, understand, is the broker has to release the listing agreement. The agent has no control over whether or not there is a release or a withdrawal without release. I'm going to go off your preference. But at the end of the day, if we have a pain in the butt client that is doing nothing but trying to go on Google and write bad reviews or calling our front desk and yelling at us, and I'm getting phone call after phone call, I might look at you as the agent and say, I'm sorry, I know you worked really hard on this, but I'm releasing this listing. Regardless of whether you want to or not, unfortunately, the broker has the final say on listings, period. So a release means that I am going to allow that client to list with anybody else in the world that they want to. I am releasing them 100% from their contract. A withdraw just simply means you don't want to sell your home anymore. I'm going to withdraw it from the market off the MLS, and we won't put a sign in the yard anymore. None of that. But you're not allowed to go list it with somebody else until our listing agreement expires. Yep. So I know that was a long, but that's one of the things, like I say, that at Keller Williams, there's a lot of liberties that you have to run your own business here. We don't care about the commission that you're charging. I want you to charge as much as you can because you're worth it, but we don't care. You're running your own business. If you want to take a 3-month listing agreement and that's what you negotiate, take a 3-month listing agreement. That's fine. But when push comes to shove, unfortunately, the agent doesn't have any control over the listing at the end of the day. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody online there?
I do have a question, not necessarily about the exclusive right to sell, but for a one-time showing agreement, do you have to have a minimum of $3,500 commission?
No, you do not. For the commission, again, you can do, you could say $1,000 if you wanted to on a one-time showing agreement. You could do the 3,500, but we have the 7% and the 3,500 in there for a reason, because if it was blank, people would just think it's 100% negotiable. And even though it really is 100% negotiable, we want to give you a standard, because if you have to throw me under the bus, then throw me under the bus. Like if you have to say, I have to call my broker. I don't know that I can do anything less than $3,500. Let me go to my car and pretend to call my broker. And you come back and you say, oh, I was able to get it down to $3,000. I'm sorry, that's the best I could do. Then do it. I mean, at the end of the day, you need to be the hero with your client. They don't know who I am, so what does it matter? You know, you can negotiate, but I would tell you if you're doing a one-time showing agreement for $1,000, I sure hope it's a $50,000 or less house, because even a $50,000 you're worth more than that. But yes, you can negotiate your own commission.
Okay, well, this is what happened. So I had him, we were gonna list the house at 6%, around, 70 to 80,000, something like that is probably what I was gonna go for. And then we ended up having a one-time showing agreement with an investor over the weekend. Came to terms for 64,000, and I told him I'd reduce the commission to 5% instead of 6, which is 3,200. So I didn't know if I needed to do a minimum of 35 or if 32 was okay.
Nope, totally up to you. Yep, that's your decision and your paycheck, and that's absolutely okay if you decided to do 3,200. Yep.
Okay, cool.
I'm just saying, if worst case scenario, you need something other than to say, hey, I'm worth it and I can charge this, you can always, say you got to check with somebody else, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions about the listing agreement? All right. So we did the exclusive right to sell large print. The exclusive right to sell is the same thing, just like I said, on 2 pages. That's the only difference. We're going to go to the property disclosure form. Not a lot to say again about this. It is a 5-page document that the Department of Commerce came out with. I don't care what brokerage you're at. This form should be completed by all sellers, and you should not help the seller fill it out. The seller should initial at the bottom of every single page. It gives them their instructions on the first page, and on the last page, they are going to sign it, and then that's where the buyer signs, acknowledging that they understand what's on this agreement. Now, I will say, we get the question all the time. Somebody will say, well, it's an investor. They've never lived in the house. Do they have to fill it out? Yes, they do have to fill it out. If they're an owner of the property, they have to fill it out. That 5-page document is from the Department of Commerce. So that is who is over the entire real estate division and the superintendent of real estate. Ohio Realtors, you'll see this as Ohio Association of Realtors. Ohio Realtors came up with this exemption form and 7 reasons on why you don't have to fill out that property disclosure form, okay? This form is not mandatory. If they meet the exemption of one of these 7, you do not have to use this form. It was brought up so that there was a form used in a real estate transaction to put the buyer on notice for why a seller was not completing the property disclosure form. But it is not required by the Department of Commerce. It is a highly suggested document by both the Ohio division, or I'm sorry, the Ohio Realtors and myself, because it's not mandatory. But these are the only 7 reasons why a seller would not fill out a property disclosure form. So if you can think of any other reason in the entire world other than these 7, the answer is yes, they have to fill out a property disclosure form. And we get this question all the time. So I'm going to go over the exemptions with you, and this is also found in .loop. So a transfer pursuant to a court order such as probate or bankruptcy court. So if somebody goes bankrupt and they don't live in the house, most likely a bankruptcy trustee will be the one filling out the listing agreement and signing all that stuff. Well, the bankruptcy trustee has never lived in the house and has no knowledge of what's happening in the property. So why would they fill out a property disclosure form? Now, in that case, the seller may be willing to work with them and fill it out. They may not. The probate court, it may be a probate trustee or a probate court representative that is filling out the listing agreement. And in that case, they would have no knowledge of the listing of the house as far as the whatever's going on inside the house with plumbing and things like that. So they might not fill it out. A transfer by a lender who has acquired the property by deed of lieu and foreclosure. Well, any foreclosure typically, whether the property was acquired by deed in lieu of foreclosure or full foreclosure, that bank is not going to fill out the residential property disclosure form because they have no idea what's going on with that property. They went in, winterized it. That's the end of the story. Transfer by an executor, guardian, or conservator or a trustee. So if there is an executor of an estate that is selling a home for their parent or loved one or whatever, they may have never lived in the house and they don't know anything about it. They're the executor, they don't have to fill it out. A guardian could be somebody such as my parent has been declared incompetent for whatever the reason, and I'm their guardian. And I don't know anything about the house they've lived in because I live in another state. I don't know anything. I don't have to fill that out. A conservator or a trustee. So both interchangeable there. So the trustee could be a trustee that is an estate trustee. It could be the house is in the name of a trust and it's a trustee that's filling it out. Then obviously the trust owns the house, the person doesn't. So the trustee is an individual of the trust, not necessarily the owner. And so they wouldn't have to fill it out. A transfer of new construction that has never been lived in. That's why you don't see a property disclosure form on the new builds. They're not required to, because nobody's lived in it. There's really nothing to disclose. Hopefully everything is as good as it should be in a new constructed house. A transfer to a buyer who has lived in a property for at least 1 year immediately prior to the sale. So you think, well, how does that really happen? How does somebody live there? Well, if you have a tenant that lives in a property and all of a sudden the landlord calls you and says, I'd like you to put this deal together. My tenant wants to buy the property from me. Well, they've lived in the property. If they've lived in it for a year, they should have a pretty good idea of what's going on with the home. Are there sewer problems? Are there roof problems or whatever? But it also could be somebody that's buying a property on land contract and now they're actually closing on land contract and you're the one that's helping them with that real estate transaction. Number 6, a transfer from an owner who has both inherited the property and has not lived in the property within 1 year immediately prior to the sale. Now, understand that "and" is a very large word, even though it's 3 letters, because this is not just a transfer from an owner who has inherited a property, but it's both. They have not lived in the property either. So sometimes you have a person, like let's say, for example, I live at home with my parents. They're elderly and I'm taking care of them. And I've lived in this house for 2 years taking care of them, right? Well, I inherit the house. Well, I've lived in the property for more than a year. So I am not exempt anymore from filling this property disclosure out. If I've been living in that home, chances are I know what's going on inside that house. So I would need to fill out the property disclosure form, even though I inherited. And then the final, a transfer where either the owner or buyer is a government entity. So if a city or municipality is buying something to tear it down, or they're buying it through eminent domain, then unfortunately, they don't need a property disclosure, whether they're selling it or buying it. It would be irrelevant. Okay, so those are the only 7 reasons. Again, if you can think of any other reason under the sun, or if a seller says to you anything different than those 7, they must fill out the property disclosure form. Now, I'm going to go back to the disclosure form, not to necessarily speak about what's contained in it, but to give you some tidbits, because things always come up. It is required that a seller fill out a property disclosure form. However, there is no consequence if they do not fill out a property disclosure form. They're not going to real estate jail. Nothing happens. They don't get, sanctioned $1 million or $1,000 or anything like that at closing. Unfortunately, they just don't fill it out. There is nothing wrong with a seller that initials the bottom of every single page, but has put an X through every single thing, just one big X across here. Or if they say seller has never lived in the home, they answer no questions and just initial. You cannot tell them how to fill this form out. It stinks if that's how they fill it out, but if that's what they do, that's what they fill out. Now, if you're on the other side of that, if you're on the buy side of that, and the agent says there is no property disclosure form, you can hound them all day long for the property disclosure form. But if the buyer chooses to buy a property without a property disclosure form, there is no consequence for either the seller or the buyer. So, any questions about the property disclosure form or the exemption? Okay. All right. So let's go over the lead-based paint disclosure. The lead-based paint disclosure is only for residential property. I don't know. I presume that people will use it in commercial as well, but it probably looks a little bit different and it's part of their purchase or listing agreement. Again, the residential property disclosure, I guess I'll just say one more thing. That is for a 4-unit building or less if it's an apartment. Commercial does not apply to that. Is a residential property disclosure form. The lead-based paint, again, that kind of is a little bit broadened. If you're a commercial agent, you're probably not going to use maybe this document. It's probably going to be in their purchase agreement, or it could be in their exclusive right to sell agreement. It's not typically a standalone document. Okay. But for us, that are selling residential real estate, a seller doesn't have a choice on whether or not to fill out this disclosure. They must fill out this disclosure. It is federally mandated that they complete this. Any house built prior to 1978 could contain lead-based paint. The seller should disclose whether or not they know of lead-based paint. And believe it or not, there have been homes in the Canton area that have had to have lead abatement done because children have eaten the lead chips off the walls and they have had lead poisoning. And that stigmatizes a property until it is cleaned up. So unfortunately, it can really affect the value of a home, and you would need to retain that documentation for a very long time, because any record that somebody could go back and find that, they're going to want to make sure it was abated properly. Okay. So let's say the seller has no idea if there's any lead-based paint. So when they're filling out this disclosure, they're going to say, check number 2, seller has no knowledge of any lead-based paint or paint hazards in the housing, and they have no reports of such. So if the seller elects number 2 and number 2 in section A and B, when you are working with the purchaser to make an offer on the property, you are not going to have them initial box C, because that says purchaser has received copies of all information listed above. Well, if there is no information listed above, the seller can possibly have disclosed anything, and the buyer could not know that they're receiving any copies of anything. So nothing's going to convey. So again, if number 2 and number 2 are checked in A and B, the buyer is going to initial, or buyers are going to initial D, that they've received the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. And then they're going to choose either 1 or 2, and that is either they're going to do a 10-day risk assessment to find out if there's lead paint in a property, or they're going to waive the opportunity to do that. In my career, I mean, I've been doing this almost 20 years, and honest to goodness, I don't know that anybody in my entire career has ever done a lead-based paint test. Anybody here have something different? Anybody online, something different? So not very common. It really isn't. Oh, Zarice, did you have one?
I have someone that she's trying to do it. Whenever they put in that the seller's not sure, she doesn't want to risk it, so she wants to get the disclosure or the test done.
But you'll have to keep me filled in, because any house built prior to 1978 is most likely going to contain lead-based paint. And where they typically did it was not on the walls; it was on the windowsills and the windows, exterior windows, and the floor baseboards and stuff like that. That's typically where they used it, was on the trim. So it's not uncommon to find it there. And if there is any chip or peeling paint, I mean, depending upon how often it was painted, you may never get down to those layers, but you might. So you'll have to keep me posted, Zarice, if you end up, just for knowledge of how it went and what the experience was. But so typically they don't. So typically, what's that?
I don't even know who to call for that.
Oh gosh, I would tell you that give them the lead-based paint disclosure form, or the pamphlet. It's going to have in there all kinds of resources.
Okay.
And that's one of the things where I will tell you, that's probably one of the most commonly missed things, is where you're having your buyer initial, they've received the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. I would tell you 90%, I'm going to guess, and that's probably a low number, but 90% of agents probably never give that pamphlet out. It is, you can print it if you want to, and it's going to print to like 17, 18 pages, something like that. It's pretty long. Or you can simply send it to them via dot loop, and then you have a record of it. So I highly suggest that you keep a record of that by sending it through dot loop. Anytime that you are selling a home prior to 1978, as far as build date. It's in dot loop. Yep, it's in dot loop under the listing documents and the sale documents. And worst case, it's always in miscellaneous documents. But they do have hard copies. You can buy color hard copies of it if you wanted to. Again, I think the better thing to do is send it through dot loop, because there's a record of you sending it and they actually have it. Whereas if I handed it to somebody, even though they're signing this saying that they got it, they could still say they never got it. So, okay. And then as the listing agent, if you're on the list side of it, you as the agent are going to have your seller complete A and B in the seller's disclosure. You're going to leave C, D, E vacant, because that's where the buyer is going to initial. But you as the listing agent are going to initial in F, and that is that you have informed the seller of their obligation under this code, and they are now aware of his or her responsibility. The seller is going to sign it, and you as the agent are going to sign it. Any questions about the lead-based paint disclosure? Okay, easy enough. All right, so let's go over, continuing with the listing stuff. I'm going to go over a document that is not used very often, but I highly encourage you to use it, and I'm going to explain why as we go through. This is the input sheet for the MLS. Now, you all put your own listings in. We don't have somebody here that does that. At other brokerages, they take more of your commission and they pay somebody to put in your listings, okay? All the stuff that is in red is something that is required by MLS now that you have to enter. So I always recommend you print this in color and you take it to the listing with you. You can fill out much of it before you ever get there. You know what your ID is, you know your name, you know the county the property's in, what the address is. You may or may not know the MLS number if you haven't started to put it in the MLS. You're going to know what showing instructions typically are going to be. The listing type is always going to be exclusive right to sell because we don't have anything different. Bless you, I think. Didn't hear a sneeze, but I saw the movement. You're going to put in the buyer's broker's compensation and things like that. So anything that's in red, that's going to be required by the MLS. The reason that I tell you that this is such a great form to use for your own business and just get in the habit is because one, it's going to put in the parcel IDs or multiple parcel IDs if you go down here to the bottom of the page. Why is that important? Well, when you go out to list a property and the seller tells you, I own 4 parcels, they're all contiguous, but I only want to sell 3 of them, and somehow you list all 4 of them in the MLS. Or the seller says, I want to list all 4 of them, and somehow you only put 1 or 2 in the MLS. That's a problem. So by having this form filled out in front of the seller is going over it with you and saying, yes, this information is correct. So you know when you put something in the MLS, it's actually correct and you didn't mistakenly put something in there, such as it has gas heat when it's really electric. Okay. So again, this particular form is not a requirement. This is just I really encourage you to use it for your own business to protect both you, yourself, the brokerage, and your client. Okay.
So I would use this, like, the way I do it, I fill everything out completely as much as I can based off the auditor site.
Mhm.
And then I take it with me and I highlight where their names are gonna be, and then I leave everything blank for the measurements. So as I'm going around and the photographers, they're doing pictures, I do the measurements, fill it all in, and then at the end, I have them as the last document, they review it.
Yep.
To make sure there's nothing that they don't like or seems a little fishy, and then I make them sign it, and then I scan it into my loop.
That's perfect.
Just
If
because I
all
want to
agents
make
did that, it would be amazing.
Yeah, 'cause it makes me like nervous, like I'm like,
Well, the reason that, and it should make you nervous, and I say that not to scare anybody, but it should. So some of the things that I can tell you in my career that I've seen, for example, are more so when you get down to these wonderful remarks. We have had agents that have put in there that the refrigerator is staying with the listing agreement says it is not staying. We have had agents put in there that a parcel is going that the seller has no intentions of selling. We have had people put in there that there are hardwood floors underneath all of the carpeting on the first floor. There is not hardwood flooring under any of the bedrooms or the hallway, and that has caused problems because the buyer relies on this information. It would have been better to say seller believes there may be hardwood floors underneath the carpet on the first floor, but not guaranteed. They didn't say that. They said there's hardwood floors underneath all the carpeting. Well, now when you get into litigation, where did that come from? Did the seller tell you that and you wrote it down? Or did you just come up with that because that's what you thought the seller said? Or did the seller not say anything of the sort and you just came up with it thinking that you knew that homes of that era typically had hardwood floors underneath all the carpeting? So that's why it's recommended that you get the seller's signature on here. So what you're doing is perfect. It's great. Again, I highly recommend it. It's kind of like insurance. You don't need it till you need it, but boy, when you need it, you're glad it's there. And this form can come in very handy to protect you from a lawsuit as an agent. Unfortunately, it may or may not protect your seller. If your seller is the one that said there are hardwood floors underneath all the carpeting and they signed this saying, yes, I reviewed this with my agent, and in fact, I agreed to it, the liability is going to shift from you most likely to that seller in a lawsuit. Okay, so you're going to protect yourself, the brokerage, and potentially your client, depending upon what's written.
I have a question. So because like I kind of like overkill with my paperwork, but whenever you have a price change, so I'm doing a status change and I'm changing the price, maybe we're lowering it or whatever the situation is. I've been like going through and using this and the exclusive right, and I strike through the original price, but the new one have them initial in addition to the status change form to show, because I want to be able to show what it was and then what we're doing, but is that?
It's probably overkill because the listing agreement's already solidified and so is this form. The MLS already shows what the listing agreement is. By the time you're reducing it, the edit status change form is really all you need to get them to sign. Again, though, this is your business. If you feel better protecting yourself and the consumer by doing that, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, just be consistent with whatever you're doing. Just don't do that with some people and not everybody. Either do it with everybody or don't do it at all. Consistency is key. And you're fine, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist in real estate. I think anybody that's been in real estate for longer than a minute, unfortunately, you will learn that statement if you haven't already learned. So any questions then on this particular agreement or this document? Again, I'm not going to go over exactly everything with it, but those are the highlights. You know, get your sellers to sign it. It's very important. Okay. All right, I think I have a chat here. I don't know what this is. Can you repeat what she said? Couldn't hear at all. Okay, yes. So what she was saying is basically she goes to the property and she fills that document out, the NearX input form that we were just looking at. So she fills out that form for the most part based on what she sees on the auditor's site, possibly what might have been in the MLS before, maybe, you know, looking back at that, things like that. She then, while the seller is doing their paperwork with her, and she goes up and measure rooms and the photographer's taking pictures, she then comes back after she's measured the rooms, done the rest of the paperwork, and she meets with the client again before she leaves. This is the last document. She says, is everything on this document accurate? You know, do you believe that everything on here, what I said or what I measured, is everything accurate? And then she has them sign it. That's their agreement saying that they understand that what she put in that, they believe is accurate. So that's what was being said. All right. So the home warranty is one of those things where, again, I will tell you, you know, you should be offering home warranties to every single client that you can imagine. I don't care if it's a $40,000 house or a $400,000 house. If you are not being consistent in your business and offering the same things to all clients, you could be considered that you are discriminating, and maybe not necessarily discriminating against the protected classes, but just discriminating because you think that somebody that is buying a $40,000 house can't afford a home warranty, or they need it because it's a $40,000 house, but the person buying a $400,000 house you don't offer because, oh, they got the money to fix whatever. That's discrimination. I mean, you're discriminating on your own beliefs as opposed to offering every client the same service every time. So that is why we have been required or recommended, and I required as your broker to say, you are either going to get page 11 signed of either the 210 home warranty or the America's Preferred. That pamphlet is 12 pages long. Page number 11 either elects to have a home warranty or it says I'm waiving the home warranty. I don't care which warranty you get it on, and I don't care if you choose not to use that warranty at all. If you don't want to use that, then you're going to use the home warranty insurance waiver for your buyer or seller. So you will, and this actually says seller signature, and I need to update this. The form has been updated in .loop. It says buyer or seller. I have not updated my own loop, so shame on me. This is just, it will say that you have offered a warranty to the consumer and they are either electing it or they are not electing it. They will initial and then sign it. You need either this form as part of your compliance or you need page 11 of one of those other two. Okay. If there is a home warranty that is being purchased, so let's say Color, Howard Hanna, Remax, different brokerage other than us, they are offering a warranty on their listing. And your buyer accepts that. You've negotiated into the deal. Your buyer signs their home warranty. Fine, include the home warranty in your .loop file because you're going to want it for your records anyway for your client. You do not need then page 11 of ours or the home warranty waiver because they're getting a home warranty. So any questions about the home warranty? I get an awful lot of questions on why we have to do a waiver when it's in the listing agreement and the purchase agreement on whether or not they are electing to get it. But the problem is, as agents, we fill those forms out and oftentimes don't even say anything to the consumer. Again, we, on our own premise, we just say, oh, well, they're buying a $400,000 house. Oh, well, they don't need that home warranty. They've got the money to fix it. And you just simply check the box on the listing agreement for no. And then here it comes out, the consumer says, you never offered it to. This is saying you offered it. They signed it saying, I want it or I don't.
So I have a question. So again, like I'm very much like overkill. And so I do a lot of extra paperwork I probably don't need to do, but previously like I worked in HR, and so I just get like very much about the time and the writing that really doesn't exist. And I've heard that recently people going through like COVID, they were waiving inspections. And then we saw a huge increase of people trying to sue afterwards. Because they were like, oh, well, I didn't, even though I waived my inspections, had I known that there was this, I wouldn't have bought the house. And I've heard some people say that because their agent offered a home warranty and they took the home warranty, it protected the agent from being involved in the lawsuit. So I kind of got like right from the rip, I got like really into the habit of I do a home warranty on every single one of my purchase agreements, whether they want it or don't want it. I ask for it. I'm very consistent in that. And then I leave it up to, if I'm not representing the buyer, then I leave it up to the seller to agree or disagree.
Yep.
And if I'm doing the seller, then I always try to at least push so there's like coverage for them,
Mhm.
like protection. Have you seen or heard of?
Yeah, so the question was for those of you online. So the question is, have you seen an agent protect themselves or shield themselves from any kind of liability by getting a client to accept or at least offer a home warranty on all of these folks that are not doing inspections on their homes when they're buying? And the short answer is yes, there is a liability shield there because you are offering a warranty, period, which you should be doing to all clients anyway. But that's just another layer that says the consumer chose not to get inspections and they also didn't get the warranty, or they chose to get the warranty, which should hopefully cover everything, but it's limited. So they didn't do the inspection. They felt like they were going to have protection after the fact. Anytime that you get these documents that we provide to you signed, whether it's a like or dislike on your part, whether the client elects to have them or not have them, as far as a warranty or any kind of coverages, things like that, it really is in your best interest to get it done because that's why they're here. They're here to protect you. I will tell you that I think it's America's Preferred Home Warranty. Your deductible, so our deductible here, I want to say is $7,500 for a claim against E&O insurance. It's not cheap because E&O insurance isn't cheap. And we have over 250 agents that, everybody's paying for it monthly. So at the end of the day, in order to get a discount on it, we up that deductible, hoping we don't have to use it. The agreement that we have here is that you as an agent have to cover 1% of the purchase price of the deductible up to $7,500. So that means that in your agreement that you've signed as an agent, when you are onboarded, if it's $100,000 house, your deductible is 1%. The brokerage will pick up the balance of that deductible. America's Preferred Home Warranty will say, we will waive the deductible if you got our warranty signed at the time of the purchase. So that's pretty good and pretty big. Now, I can't say that they will waive all up to $7,500 of it, but they waive up to like about $3,500, $4,500 of it. It's pretty good. And I'll look into that a little bit more if they're still offering that. They were offering that, but we renew things each year. So I'll double check for 2022. But yes, anytime you can get the warranty document signed, great idea. Any other questions about the warranties? Okay. We only have about 9 minutes left. I'm not going to keep you guys past 1 o'clock. There are plenty of other documents that we could go over in here. I'm only going to go over one more for the sake of time, and then I'm going to open it up to any questions you guys might have otherwise. And that is just our anti-fraud disclosure. This disclosure should be signed on your listings and your buyers. Anytime, it's just like the consumer guide. Get it signed, get it signed, get it signed. Because unfortunately, people love to defraud other people. Like if they can get free money, they're going to do it. We have actually, at our own brokerage, we have had where an agent has given the title company's information to the buyer to wire their funds. The buyer has got a call or an email that looked like it was from our agent or the title company about 20 minutes before they were going to the bank to wire their funds and said, oh, I was mistaken when I gave you that. By 1 digit, here's the new wiring instructions or whatever it was. And these people wired $9,000 some out of the country and didn't know it until after it had already happened. Once that wire is gone, it's gone. We can't get it back and there's no tracing it once it's out of the country. And it happens within a matter of minutes. It's gone. So I tell you, get the anti-fraud disclosure statement to let your buyers and sellers know. Again, we're never going to ask you for money. If you get an email that says it came from me and it's changing a wiring instructions or giving you wiring instructions or credit card information, I didn't do it. Don't reply to it. Never give your credit card information or your social security number, or any information in an email because it's not secure. So that's the last document I'll go over with you. On the buy side, there's a lot more documents, but the listing side, I really just wanted to get a good feel for what you're going to talk to your sellers about and who's signing the documents. Do you have the right documentation for who's signing the documents, and what documents are absolutely required in order for you to get your paycheck when this closes? So are there any questions about any other things, whether it's related to listings, just in general about your real estate practice? Is there anybody have any questions either in class or online? Okay, nope, that's okay.
So have we ever thought about adding in like a photo consent? So I noticed like when I was going through my stuff, and even before, like I was at Cutler and we didn't have it there either, but I got a photo consent that I used in HR, but I tailored it to be like for myself and for Keller Williams.
You mean for people?
For people. So, and I say this because like social media. So everything we do is like social media. And so many people go and take photos of like the people holding a sign. Well, when I first started off, I had a family and I wouldn't have known any better. Like had I not had that form, apparently there was like one of the kids is getting adopted. So you have to like shade out the kid's face. And then there's like other kids where they're like, oh, I don't want them in the photo, but then I want these people in the photo. Well, I wouldn't have known like had I not had them go through it. So before I like in part of my listing or my buying, I have everybody sign a form that just says you are giving me and Keller Williams complete permission that we can post your photo on social media, we can post it wherever we need to post it to advertise, and that in the event you ever decide you want it taken down, you need to write a letter, and it excludes myself and Keller Williams completely from any form of lawsuits. Like,
Well, I love that, and I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going to say so the people online can hear. So what she was saying is there a form that we have, or would we look into possibly creating a form that would be like a liability or hold harmless for our clients giving permission for their photo to be used in our marketing or just online or wherever? And the reason I say I love it, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. One, I love it because you know the HR side of you is saying, hey, let's take care of our clients and Keller Williams, and I love that. The other thing that I will tell you is, unfortunately, you never as an agent want to create a document that has anything to do with Keller Williams without us running it through our attorney first.
okay.
So I would say, give me the document, let me run it past the attorney before we do anything, because first of all, as an agent, it's very difficult to not want to engage or to not engage in legal practice.
Yeah.
You cannot write a legal document between the brokerage and somebody else. I can't even do that. It must be written by an attorney. Otherwise, it's practicing law without a law degree. So even when you're writing addendums and different things like that, you have to be very careful, because as careful as you want to be to protect your client, you're practicing law when you're writing up an agreement between a buyer and a seller, because you're not a party to the document. You may be an agent for them, but you are not signing it. Now, if it was between you and a seller or you and it, that's fine.
Okay.
So those kind of things are, so that's why I say, like, I love it, but at the same time,
If I take the Keller Williams out of it, then you're okay.
right, you're running your own business as an independent contractor. So if you choose to have an attorney write it or you write it, as long as you feel that it's legally satisfying to a court of law, that you're not going to get yourself into trouble and you've protected yourself, then you could absolutely indemnify yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. I would say I'm not opposed to the idea of having that kind of document in place here, but at the same time, I'm more thinking that we sell real estate for a living. And even though it's a client-based business, if a client allows me to take their picture, I sure hope that they would not be in the witness protection program and not let me, like,
That's why I was like, oh my gosh, like I was afraid after that.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, but that's a great point, and that's why I say, I mean, because I would not think to take a picture of a seller or a buyer client at any time without their permission. Like I would be like at a closing table, hey, do you mind? I'm gonna take your picture, you know. And if they're holding a sold sign, I would hope that they're gonna think you're gonna do something with that picture. And typically, if they're already on Facebook or any other marketing, you know, or social media stuff, they're understanding that you're gonna market that. But I love that you're making us think outside of the box, and I will definitely check with our attorney to see if that's something that we should be doing. But definitely give me that form, because, you know, if you're thinking about it and you have that HR background, there's nothing that says that other agents may not want to use that. And if we really are entering into an era where everything is CYA, that's not a bad thing to have. So yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Do you have anything additional?
Sorry, I know I've asked.
Well, don't be sorry. That's what we're all here for. And honestly, if you're learning, I'm learning, we're all learning. So it's great. Anybody online though, do you guys have anything different want to talk about? Hearing none, it's 2 minutes to 1. I'm letting you go free. So, and everybody enjoy your week.